Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Soul Focused Radio. This is your host, Martin Teddy Bear Moses Friedman, and I'm joined once again by Ragivah Mahdi. What's happening, Ragivah Mahdi?
I'm doing well, Martin. I'm doing well, Moses, Teddy Bear Moses. It's good to see you
Yeah,
again. It's good to be on the podcast and excited about the video aspect of it now. That
yeah.
we got it. Video.
Yes, we do. It's not
Yes,
just audio anymore.
it's video.
Um, yeah. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pick up the second half of our conversation. I really enjoyed the first half. I know our listeners did too. Really thinking about this transition from reprogramming to repurposing. And also I really hope people sat with, in between these episodes, I really hope that people sat with this idea of how much we've been wasting, how much of ourselves we've been wasting, and blaming it on everybody externally, right? So I wanted to start with a story. I wanted to start today's episode with a story, and I won't name names, just for the sake of. I think the people would probably be happy if I did, but I'm not going to. But you and I both worked for a long time for the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, and we used to travel all over, right? So I remember the first time I ever went to New York. I couldn't wait to get to New York. New York is kind of like, to me, like the homeland, like the promised land, I love it there, right? My energy, I had so much energy. When I first started going there, I used to walk from Midtown to like the Lower East Side, which is like 3 or 4 miles.
I did the same thing. I walked the
Did
hole
you?
in my shoes, like literally from
Me too,
old
bro.
Spanish Harlem all the way to Chinatown. I just got caught up,
Oh, yeah, you beat me a little bit on that because I didn't go. I went from Midtown to Chinatown. I thought that was pretty big, but yeah, you get caught up in the energy there, right? You feel it when you get off the plane. It's just amazing. And I've been going there since I was a kid to visit family, but I'd never spent a lot of time, and I hadn't been in probably 15 or 20 years when I went back with the Institute. So the first place we stayed was Howard Johnson's, and I know people might think of Howard Johnson's as not being that nice, but
It was
the Howard
nice.
Johnson's, the Howard Johnson's in Midtown is nice. I remember staying there as a kid. For some reason, the main thing I remember is they had the best fried clams. That's what I remember as a kid. But so we're staying at the Howard Johnson's, right? So we get there, and it's myself, another white woman, and a black woman, who's my senior in the work, right? And so we get up to the counter. It's all people of color at the check-in counter. And the first thing that happened was they looked to me to be the one that was having the card, right? So that was triggering for all of us, right? No, I'm not the one with the card. It's it was actually a black woman, right? So she gives the card, everything's good. She gives us our keys, and we start walking. And there's two towers. There's Tower A and Tower B. So the older, the other white woman and myself, we all looked at our card, at our key cards, and we had Tower A, and the black woman had Tower B. And so she said, well, hold on a minute. How come you two got Tower A and I got Tower B? She said, no. Hell no, this is not happening. So all three of us marched back up to the desk. She said, I want the same tower you put them in. No, that's not happening. You put me in the same tower as them. If they're in Tower A, I want to be in Tower A. So next morning, let me tell you something. Tower A was under construction. It was not nice. The room was not nice or anything, right? We get up and the three of us had gotten there, and then our boss, the director of the institute, he got there later on. So the three of us are talking, and we're all kind of complaining because we didn't get our sleep. Our sleep wasn't great. The rooms are, being refurbished. And, we see, we know Ron. Everybody knows Ron, right? So we see Ron, and Ron says, you say, hey, Ron, how'd you sleep? And Ron says, oh, I slept so good. He said, Tower B's, just been renovated, and the rooms are amazing. And we all looked at each other. And the black woman, she's like, I'll be damned. I talked myself out of Tower B because I was so used to, if you put in the white people, I'm going with the white people. So I just thought that was a really good example of, first of all, it's funny as hell.
It is.
And it's a good example of how we've been programmed, how we've
Right.
come to believe,
Yeah, and how how racism could turn our minds into a very inefficient tool, a tool that produces inefficiency.
Mm.
Right? When our mind is really designed and orchestrated to be a tool of efficiency and effectiveness. Right? So we create stories. I know I could tell you so many stories for myself just doing that, based on programming that is taking place in the memory bank. Memory banks of when I was a child, a younger, my great grandmother telling me, put your hands in your pocket when you go into the store so that nobody will follow you. Right.
Mm.
I remember when I turned 50, I walked into a store and I put my hands in my pocket. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? That's how deep it was in the memory bank. But it was, of course it was unconscious. But when I became conscious of it, I was like, so what else is this connected to? And what else is this causing to happen as a ripple effect in life by me putting my hands in my pocket? How much of me putting my hands in my pocket is keeping racism alive? Right. And if we really did a strategic forecast on the ripple effect of that, what systems is that holding in place? What beliefs is that holding in place? And, you would say, well, but you're making yourself responsible. Well, the only person that could transform what's in my subconscious mind is me. And racism was created to produce those thoughts whereby I would be in conflict with me. You get what I'm saying? And being in conflict with me would then cause my mind to operate in a way that's inefficient for me. So instead of looking to maximize the full potential in every situation, my mind would look for problems in every situation. Have an expectation. And if I have an expectation that I'm going to get stopped, it increases the likelihood of me getting stopped. In addition to, there's a system designed to follow you. So what I'm saying is that whole way of thinking gets us caught up in the gravitational pull of racism. If racism was a planet, then that thinking keeps us caught in the gravitational pull of racism.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. And this is a theme for us because a lot of the trainings that we're doing now, because we're asking people to repurpose, right? We're saying repurpose all that energy, that we're saying repurpose fighting energy into creating energy, right?
Right.
And we also repurpose that scared energy and the predicting of negative things happening. And I just want to be really clear. This plays out for those of us that are white as well. It plays out for us. You talked in our, last week, I don't know, when we're going to publish this, but the last time you and I spoke, we produced 2 podcasts around, the biggest slaves on the planet being white people, right? And so I want to be really clear in terms of mental slavery, right? And I want to be really clear that we also we have a lot of energy we have to repurpose. For us, it plays out differently. For us, it plays out, I would say, for many of us in like guilt and shame, and plays out in cognitive dissonance of the way we see ourselves not matching up with the world. But we also are not producing the results that we need to because of mindset that's been placed on us that has told us certain things about ourselves that we know aren't true. So I just want to be really clear that we're saying all of us. And when we do trainings now, we find people being really resistant to this repurposing, right? Because we were so used to and almost comfortable in what we think is predictable behavior from everybody towards everybody.
When you were saying that, I was thinking about an experience that I had where me and one of our colleagues that you know of, Diana Dunn with the People's Institute, me and Diana attended a workshop that was different from the Institute's workshop. We were sort of like looking around and wanted to have some different experiences. So we went to Boston to participate in this workshop that was put on through the health department in Boston. And in the workshop, they did privilege walks. And one was about social issues. The other one was about financial issues. And it was all race, based on race, where you end up at. So you take one step if you got a certain amount of money in the bank, take another step if you, et cetera, take a step back if you don't. So in both privilege walks, the ones that was about social, as a Black man, I was last. The privilege walk that was about finances, I was last. So I was last in both privilege walks, dead last, like at the very back of the room. And I remember in the pit of my stomach of a hurt, a disappointment, and in the next moment, anger a rage even would ensue in me. And I walked out, and Diana walked behind me and she says, "You all right?" And I was like, "Fuck this shit. I'm not doing this shit no more." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, I'm not going around teaching nobody about racism because it's a waste of fucking time. If I'm last in both categories, regardless of how much I've contributed to this world, then and my life still doesn't matter. Black Lives Matter. My life still doesn't matter. Then I'm not doing this anymore. And as I was walking down the street, the voice of my great grandmother, I could hear her voice asking me this question that she would often ask me when I find myself struggling with something in life. And the question was, is there more to you than this? I was like, fuck, yes. Her name is Mabel G. Landry. So I would say, yes, mama. We used to call her mama. There's more to me. She said, well, if there's more to you than this, then it seems to me you have something to do, right? You have something you need to be focused on. And in that moment of clarity, what I realized was that the expectations I was trying to live up to was to satisfy white America. And I had been crushed because no matter what I did to satisfy white America, it did not work. I was still last. It was a beautiful moment, actually, when I was able to repurpose it, because it was that moment that then recalibrated my mind in the right perspective. In other words, got my mind in a perspective that made my mind effective and efficient. What do I mean by that? It was in that moment I committed myself to maximizing me. And that had nothing to do with white America. It had everything to do with living up to my full potential, regardless of what the external situations are. I'm going to put my foot on the gas, on the accelerator, and wear it out. Right? I'm gonna go as fast as I can go. I'm gonna be as powerful as I can be, and I'm not gonna be using the standards of white America as my guide, as my measurement. I'm gonna use some higher standards, because this world, the standards are so low. That's why it produces so much waste, because it's inspiring us to reach to our highest level, right? So that was a game changer for me, because then, not having any expectations, I changed my whole blueprint when I changed my expectations, right? My life conditions completely transformed because I changed my expectations. I changed my perspective. No longer was I trying to please white America. And to be honest with you, for years I had been trying to please white America. Like so many people of color unconsciously live their lives to prove their humanity to white people, to prove that they're good enough to white people, to prove that they're good enough to white systems, to prove that they're good enough to everything that is about whiteness. And that's why in these studies that we do in our workshop, you find that no matter what people's race are, they have a bias in favor of white and a bias against black.
That's right.
Whether or not it's shoot or don't shoot, whether or not it's the preschool teacher study, whether or not it's the dog test, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody in this society has been programmed in such a way where they are sort of like leaning and have a tendency toward seeing white as positive and seeing black as negative, even if they are black, even if they're Hispanic, even if they're Chicano, even if they're Native American, even if they're Asian, to see black as negative and white as positive. So that means that they're performing whiteness too. So I was attempting to perform whiteness, and after years of trying to perform whiteness, I was last. And it was a wake-up call. This is what happens when a person of color is, because I think about all the things that people are shocked by today. And I'm like, where have you been to be shocked by this stuff? That's what my sober mind asked me when I saw myself last. Why am I shocked? Why am I so disappointed? I had to be honest with myself. It was because I was hoping that I would be recognized by white people, by white society, as being someone of value, rather than creating a system of value that values me and values those that's like me. And then, creating that as my base rather than trying to prove stuff to white people.
Give us some examples of some of the things that you think people are shocked by that they shouldn't be. What are some things that come to mind?
You take, for example, the disproportionate sentencing
Mm-hmm.
in the criminal justice system, where we'll see a white person commit the same crime as a person of color. White person get less time than a black or brown person.
Mm-hmm.
These police shootings, right, where we see how, when a white person with a weapon, there's a built-in hesitation that police will stay there all day to talk them down, whereas a
Mm-hmm.
black person without a weapon, will be shot and killed and it be justified.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things that we shouldn't be shocked about. But what we should do is create a whole nother standard of life for ourselves, whereby we pool our resources together and we police our own communities, whereby the police have to come through us policing our own communities to even come in the community.
Right.
But that will require what? Us to take responsibility for the standards in which we're going to live. We're going to raise our standards of life so high that everybody else will be in awe of how high we raised them.
Mm-hmm.
What we've been doing in our attempt to live up to white people, we've lowered our standards because where white people see us is at the bottom anyway. Right?
That's right. Right.
So I think about, people of color saying, you got to be twice as good. You got to work twice as hard. Well, I see that. Repurpose that, right? That's beautiful, because that means that we've been set up to be the next leaders. If we've been the ones that have been working twice as hard, having to study twice as much, having to do everything, that means then the universe has been preparing us to take the lead. But you can't take the lead from the bottom. And if we were still existing or trying to live as black people, as people of color, as defined by this racist system, then we're going to always be subject to the rules and definitions that come along with this whole world. We got to redefine ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, absolutely. So what do you say to somebody? And I've heard you, in workshops, I've heard people challenge you on this and say, well, how, I'm not the one that I'm not asking police to follow me. I'm not asking people to follow me in stores. I hear people say to you, well, all this stuff is happening to me. What am I supposed to do about it? It's real that it's happening. So I want to be clear. What we're not saying, we and you aren't saying that this stuff isn't real, right? That there isn't like real external pressure. But what do you say to somebody that says like, how am I supposed to, this stuff is shocking. Like this is horrible. All the stuff that's happening. How am I supposed to change myself while all this horrible stuff is happening to me on a day-to-day basis?
Well,
what would you say?
I think that's a good question. And I think you should also ask ourselves this question: how has it been going, us continuing on the path that we're on? So it's not a matter of, one or the other, because they could both be true at the same time. It could be true, and it is true, that the systems are doing what they do. But it also could be true we still are responsible for lifting ourselves up to another level. Right? Those two things could be true at the same time. It's hard for us sometimes to process being responsible for ourselves in a system that we are victims to. Right? It could be hard, difficult, but the reality is we haven't tried us really. I mean, I might say we haven't tried. It's not true, because I think about Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and the Nation of Islam, and how they distinguished themselves in terms of their higher standards that was raised so high. How they were treated by law officers were different than how everyday people were treated by law officers. And they didn't carry guns, right? So we have some examples, but we don't, as a collective, don't necessarily lean toward that. Why? Because they got us by the ego. And because they have us by the ego, we're still trying to please white America. We want permission from white America. We want white America to apologize. We want white America to say we were wrong. And even if white America says it, it still doesn't change the reality of our condition, because the condition cannot be transformed from the outside in. It can only be transformed from the inside out. And that's real talk. That's a talk we really been running from.
Right. And that's the real repurposing, right? So we have to repurpose this, because a lot of what we have to repurpose is all the energy we put into hopelessness, helplessness, and feelings of being overwhelmed, correct?
Right.
Because most of us, regardless of race, most of us think that ending racism is nearly impossible, or many would say it's completely impossible. Never seen it in my lifetime. It's, you hear me say this all the time. People say it's the one thing I know for sure is that racism will never end. Think about the energy that goes into that, right? You talk about wasteful energy. Think about the energy that goes into knowing. That's an active thing, right? You just don't know once, but you're knowing that racism will never end. Right. And then what does that look like to repurpose that into energy to actually create the ending of racism, right? The end of racism.
It's a beautiful thing because racism will not go away until we repurpose the lessons of racism. Until we repurpose racism will remain. To repurpose a thing requires you to take responsibility for the impact that thing has had on you. Because if we're waiting for, let's say, if a woman is raped by someone and she sits around and waits for that person who raped her to come and accept responsibility for her before she starts healing, she's going to be a mess for a long time. And we have, as people of color, have taken that same position. We've literally been waiting for the people who oppressed us to say, okay, I'm sorry. We oppressed you. Now you can start healing. Right? And look, everything that has a beginning automatically has an end.
That's right.
So racism has a beginning. It wasn't here from the very beginning. So it has an end, but the end comes only, like everything in life, once it has served its purpose, it leaves, but it won't leave until it's served its purpose. So racism has served the purpose, but we're not acting as if it has. We're still fighting against it, which means we acting as if we don't know racism has served its purpose. In other words, we fight it so it gives it more purpose to stay. When we stop fighting it and start repurposing it, we start putting ourselves up above it. We start living at a higher level. Now, this may sound crazy to some people because they're not on the same dimension that we're having this conversation from. But when you look at this conversation from a repurposing conversation of racism, you think about all the potential that racism is giving us to transform the world with. There's so much waste that racism has produced. So there's a whole lot of waste to transform, to repurpose into something extremely powerful for the sake of humanity. Because this has been a humanity lesson.
The previous podcast to this one, the one we did before on the biggest slave on the planet, just want to be clear which one I'm talking about. We talked a lot about, the Black Wall Streets and the era of Reconstruction, right? That's a good example, isn't it? I mean, people literally, they didn't just repurpose racism, they repurposed chattel slavery.
Right.
And all that energy, they repurposed it into, not everybody, of course, not everywhere, of course, but in a lot of places, repurposed it into thriving energy, into economic success and other types of success.
Right. I think that's a good example of Black Wall Street because they were more than one. It wasn't just Tulsa, Oklahoma, like a lot of people don't
multiple know. Yeah.
So it was people of color, Black people pooling their resources, repurposing what they had experienced, and becoming so tight knit and close to each other. The only thing that they didn't do was learn how to defend themselves. And, that is the biggest missing point that we have to get, because we can't just create. We have to also protect what we create. And we have to demonstrate a level of value of what we produce that is worthy of being protected. And to understand that protecting something is the right of every human being to protect its own life, to protect what it values. And you have cover by the universe when you protect what you've created. So, I'm not judging our people because I think there was magical what they did, but what they proved to you is that even in the face of some of the harshest times in this world for people of color, for Black people, especially, they were able to produce industries that were beyond the standard that white America had deemed for us as Black people. We were living better than white people in a lot of ways around the country during the time was around Depression, the Great Depression. They were in these places, they were thriving, not because they were focused on the problem, because they were solution oriented. That means they were repurposing stuff. and bringing it to a higher level all the time. Wasn't sitting around in this victim state, because what happens is the victim state only gives you more of what you already have. Keeps giving you the same thing that you already got. You can't get nothing different in the victim state of mind.
What do you say to people that say that some of what you say could be interpreted as like victim blaming or victim shaming, or or that there's something like that feels wrong to a lot of people about putting the responsibility of healing on the victim? And even in the example that you gave earlier about about a woman being raped, I'm part of my mind was going, well, I could hear some of our listeners be like, oh, he's how dare a man say that, right? How dare a man say that it's the woman's responsibility to heal? So I know from experience that people do react when we talk about stuff like this, that they feel like it's victim blaming or shaming. So what do you say to that, Ragivah, Mahdi?
Well, I say this, let's look at the mathematics of it, because today in our society we have problems dealing with the mathematics of things. And what I mean by that, the cold truth of things. We have created so many stories around stuff, and we're so caught up in the stories that we don't see the actual facts. The actual facts are, society should hold the perpetrator accountable. And I hope everybody hears that, right? So the perpetrator should be held accountable. But the healing that the woman or whoever the victim is, that they must go through, they're going to have to take it upon themselves to do it. If they're waiting on the perpetrator as to give some signal, then what they are doing is giving power to the perpetrator. If a woman is going to take her power back, she's going to have to take responsibility for her own healing. And that's a necessity. Same thing with us as people of color. If we are going to take our power back, then we have to take responsibility for the recovery of our genius, our power, and our originality, right? Mm-hmm. Right? Our genius, our power, and what is it? Our optimal functioning. We have to take responsibility for that, right? If we don't take responsibility for that, then it won't happen, because no one on the outside can know what your genius, what your power, and what your optimal functioning is. So it's something that they can't give to you. So we are literally, when we use that language, it's very, very slick, but it's very distracting. And what it does, it produces waste, because it says wait until the perpetrators decide to do something for us. Wait until they change the system. Wait until they acknowledge that it's wrong. Wait. And if we wait, we're going to be more generations in the hole that we've already been in. This is God stuff what we're talking about, because if you're going to get into the mind of God, then you have to take responsibility for what you have control over now. And so even as a victim of racism, I have control over my mind. I have control over getting my mind to work for me. I have control over being in harmony with myself or being in conflict with myself. If I'm in conflict with myself, I'm not going to be a useful tool to the transformation of anything. I have to get myself first in harmony first in order for this system not to take advantage of me. This system will take advantage of me because it's designed to do that, as long as I'm in conflict with myself. When I'm 100% on my own side, I'm less likely to be taken advantage of by this system. Why? Because my ego, they don't have me by the ego. I got myself by the ego. I've taken my ego to the dojo and mastered it. So my ego is not being used by this system. All that other talk is the ego, them having us by the ego.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, because we're also the only ones that we have a stake. We have a stake in our healing. No, the external forces don't have a stake. They're not going to gain anything from us healing. So we're waiting on people to, do something for us, or even provide us with opportunities to do something that they don't want to have happen. They're not interested in us healing, because when we're healed, we're harder to control, right? And when we're healed, we don't produce as much waste. I was thinking as you were talking that, that waste is profitable, right? There's literally a $1 billion industry called waste management, right? So like, I was just thinking about that as an analogy for what we've been talking about in these two podcasts today, that literally instead of repurposing waste, we manage it. Like we're managing waste. Now, some of that's recycling, but the vast majority of it's not recycling. And the vast majority of what we think gets recycled, by the way, doesn't get recycled.
Right.
It ends up on those barges and those landfills and being shipped over to China, and all that as well. So we're the only ones that really have a stake in us healing. The powers that be don't.
Right. I was thinking about when you were saying that, the first thing that came to my mind was Bill Gates. Mm-hmm. And how Bill Gates transformed computer technology. Mm-hmm. And he really did it by cleverly inserting in a recycle bin into the process. Because remember how antiquated computer technology was before the trash bin.
Yes.
And it was antiquated because it would produce a lot of waste. So let's say is the data that would build up on the data banks of your computer at that time and will cause the computer to function very slow. Mm-hmm. Slow, antiquated. So everybody was like, this computer thing ain't working. So Bill Gates came along and he introduced the recycle bin, and it transformed the whole game. Mm-hmm. Introducing the recycle bin meant he figured out a way to recycle the data or information within the computer such that it was not taking up space on the hard drive, but it was freeing it up to allow the computers to function very efficiently and effectively. The same thing happens in our mind. That's what made Bill Gates a rich man. He is one of the richest men in the world because he put ecology to computer technology. So me and one of my brothers a long time ago was sitting down talking. Well, first of all, I was given an assignment by my teacher, Master Wali Muhammad. After going through training for 5 years, we got to a point, he says, well, it's time for y'all to graduate. So I was like, yeah, I'm ready to graduate too. He says the graduation require you to create something never seen before, to bring about an original idea. And me being smart at the time, and still the world got me by the ego, I told him, man, I could do that. I'm gonna do it overnight. I'll come back tomorrow with an original idea. I came back the next day, didn't have one. Every time I came back, everybody at the table, the 9 other brothers, would prove real quick that it wasn't original. And I was like, damn. Mm-hmm. And it took me 5 years later to create an original idea. And the original idea was called the art of life recycling, which was to recycle the human relationship waste that develops in a human being's life that they don't understand, which are experiences that they don't understand why they keep happening, and how to repurpose those experiences to become efficient and effective, right? And so everything that I've done has been rooted in that verse of ecology, but applied to the human life, not to computers, right? So all of my technology that I've ever taught my clients and the people I've worked with is based in making their life more efficient and effective. It starts first with the mind becoming efficient and effective, right? You got to take your mind, you got to take your second mind to the dojo, because we don't know enough about our first mind. Any person of color in their first mind is powerful. Any person, quote unquote, white, who once European, in their first mind is powerful. But race keeps us distracted from our first mind. So we're not in harmony with our first mind, which means that we are in conflict with ourselves most of the time. And racism gives us the best way to express that conflict within ourselves.
So as we wrap up this, this is powerful stuff, that you're saying. And literally it is like not just revolutionary, but it's evolutionary technology, right?
It is.
That this false self that we have been fed, we have to repurpose it. We have to repurpose the false self, not just deny it, not just say, we're moving on to the next thing. We're getting rid of it. And that's why I think this is powerful, because, we've been framing this idea for a little while now that we're moving from anti-racist to pro-human solidarity. And what we're also saying is anti-racism in many ways is kind of fundamentally a reprogramming piece. And what we're saying is we want to get to
a lot of, and it produces a lot of waste.
Still produces a lot of waste, even in being against and anti and fighting all the time. And we're saying we're transforming to a repurposing model of taking all of that energy and repurposing it into human solidarity, and to return back to our power. All of us returning back to our power.
Because remember this: the garbage is still there. It's just not in front of your face.
That's right.
So we could get mad and upset and like, rah rah rah, but the source of what created racism, right?
Yeah.
The source of what created whiteness is still not being repurposed. Because if we don't get to the source of what created whiteness, which then gave birth to racism, then we won't understand how to completely eradicate racism from the planet. Because this is not, it's because it's in the caste system. When you talk about caste system, you're talking about another form of racism, right? So racism then can come out of thin air. So the caste system in India is like rooted in this shit, right? So there's some things about how we see ourselves that must be recycled, and if we don't really figure out what that is and how to recycle it, how to repurpose it, then guess what? We're gonna keep dealing with this, especially if we continue to see this from a perspective of there's nothing you can do, and we got to wait for other people to. That's right. We got to wait till the system acknowledges. It's not going to happen. We got to be innovative gods about this.
And that's powerful. And I want to just hit on that analogy just a little bit more, because when we throw something away, not only is it not gone, but it comes back and affects us because it produces methane gas, and the methane gas produces greenhouse effect and global warming. And plastics are in everything now. Microplastics we eat. Anytime we eat fish or anything like that, we get microplastics in us. So it comes back on us. We think it's gone, but it's coming back on us in different ways.
All the toxicity in our life is because of the waste of ourselves. The waste of ourselves, the waste in our relationships, the waste that we have in society. We have created societies that are very highly effective at creating waste. And if we don't change our minds, if we don't have a shift in our thinking, we are doomed. But the reality is there are people like ourselves who are going to make sure that we are successful. And if you're listening to this podcast and this is really like music to your ears, then you need to join the Soul Focus movement, because the Soul Focus movement is a movement to repurpose all of these things into something beautiful while we still have time. We do not adopt the attitude that there's nothing that we can do about this. We wouldn't be doing this work if we didn't know that we can repurpose it. How do I know that? I know that because at one point, all I saw was problems in my life. And then I took my ego to the dojo, mastered it, and I taught my ego, my second mind, to go out into the world and find me the solutions. Show me how this is going to work for me. Show me how to get the maximum use out of this with minimal effort. Right? That's mastery. Maximum outcome, minimal effort. I had to teach my mind to do it. That's why I know this can be solved. Because if I could do it with my mind, then it could be replicated. I'm a human being. If one human being could be a trillionaire, all human beings could be a trillionaire. If they develop the system, if we develop a societal system, we all could do it. And then guess what? Money won't even be important no more. It shouldn't be important now, because we're making it up out of thin air anyway. The banks are printing it up. It ain't based on anything but our belief in it. And if we get that, if we wake up to that, fractional reserve banking and all that stuff, the reprinting of money, and it ain't even money, it ain't even paper no more. Most of it just digital numbers on a computer.
Yeah,
right?
I've been researching a little bit of cryptocurrency, and it's just like it's all made up, all of it. But they're showing there's something called Dogecoin, and we won't get deep into this, but it was started as a joke, and it's gone up 8,000%. Wow. So so I mean it's worth like 40 cents now, I think, but it started at like 0.025 cents or whatever. So there's people that have made $1 million off of this. And it was started as a meme. It's like based off a meme. So I think one of the things that's happening right now is a lot of people are showing the level of made upness. And I love what you said, that if anything that has a beginning has an end. And, I just want to echo what you just said. And I want to tell people that, every one of these podcasts is an invitation for you to join our journey and to be able to tap into this soul-focused technology. And I'll say that, even though I've been a part of it for a while, I still tap into it. I still wake up every day and think, just how fortunate I am that I'm on this path. And every time we have these conversations, I learn and I grow. And I really, today was very powerful for me, Ragivah Mahdi. So I want to personally thank you. Yeah, please do.
Thank you for this, Teddy Bear Moses. one of the most liberating things I've ever heard was when I discovered that race was made up.
That's right. Me too.
That it was socially constructed. It wasn't biological.
That's
When
right.
I discovered that, I started singing and dancing, because what that did was told my mind that if they can make this up, then what can I make up?
That's right.
If somebody made this up out of thin air, we can make a whole bunch of things up.
That's right.
And that's the power that we have been being distracted from by all of this, that we must rediscover the power to create the world the way we want it to be. We have the power to create the world in our image and in our likeness. Just like Europeans at the top 1% have created this world in their image and in their likeness. And they put white on top because it was closer related to them. Now, as new gods, what we have to do is create a world that is in our image and likeness. And the image and likeness of our world is that every human being be treated with honor and respect. The life of every human being is held in such high esteem that money is not even necessary, because it's all made up. And some of you can't really think right now beyond what you believe about money, because you have not really explored this whole social construct, not theory, but reality, because it's not a theory. It is real. We make all this shit. We make the rules up. We make the laws up. They're made up, and they're not even effective and efficient at treating human beings with honor. Our world is so punitive, which means it is designed to produce waste. When you create a punitive society, you are saying that waste is how we are going to run our ship. And we're going to figure out a way to take advantage of people's lives being full of waste. So much so that they are drowning in the waste, but we are making boatloads of money off of their waste.
I got you. Yeah. Thank you for that. I kind of felt like I was at a rock concert, and they you think the band is off, but then they come back for an encore, if I had a lighter, I would have lit it there to have you come back and play one of your greatest hits. So thank you again.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. And we want to thank each and every one of you for listening and watching now too. And, join us on a journey, soulfocusgroup.com. Listen to our podcast. Check us out on YouTube. We have all kinds of material and content coming out. We have fabulous opportunities for online courses and just new and innovative things that are happening. We're repurposing every day. Ragivah, Mahdi. We're repurposing all this stuff, and we're creating new approaches to ending racism that you haven't even seen yet. So come and be a part of what we're doing. Join us. Know we love you. We care about you. We want you to stay safe, stay well, and most of all, stay soul focused. That's right.